Okay, welcome back to Vintage Movie Time. I am George, and today we're taking a look at a classic film from 1951. This is The Day the Earth Stood Still, directed by Robert Wise. It starred Michael Rennie and Patricia Neal. This is a good film. I remember it from back in the day. I seen it on TV when I was a kid. It was either on a late night show or one of those like Saturday afternoon matinee shows. And it's one of those films that I vividly remember watching at that time in my life, and it made an impression. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that today because this is definitely a classic, seminal sci-fi film from the 1950s, and it's definitely worth taking a look at. So it starts off with this flying saucer that lands in Washington, D.C. Now, as you can imagine, this gets the media's attention. The army comes out, they surround the flying saucer, and this being comes out of the saucer, and it's a human-like character, and his name is Klaatu, and he's an alien, but he looks like us, and he's coming to Earth because he wants to give a message to all of humanity, and he decided to come to this location to get everyone's attention, and he wants to talk to all of humanity. But there's a problem. The military, they explained to him that, hey, you know, we can't just get all of the nation's leaders together like that. We need some time, and you can talk to our president, but Klaatu's like, no, I don't want to talk to the United States president. I want to talk to representatives of all of humanity. And he has a hard time getting that across. And the powers that be aren't being very cooperative. So what he ends up doing is he decides he's going to go out. He sneaks out away from the people after he was brought in for testing and things like that. And he's going to go incognito and walk amongst humanity and get a sense of who we are and what makes us tick. And that's the basic concept behind the story. I won't go too much further into it than that, but we have a neat character study that this sets up, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But first, I'd like to talk about some highlights, some things that I enjoy about the film. And the number one thing that I like about this movie, is the robot Gort. Now, Gort is Klaatu's kind of right hand, his enforcer, and he is just cool. He's this big robot. He looks menacing. He has no expression. And he looks formidable. Somebody you don't want to mess with. And I think he's a neat character. We'll get a little bit more into that as we go, but he's a highlight of the film for me. This is the point of the video. I'd like to talk about a few trivia things, and to do that, as always, I have the clipboard of creeps handy. So let's see what the clipboard has for us today. So going back to Gort, as I said, we were going to talk a little bit more about Gort. The role of Gort was played by Lock Martin. And a cool thing about Lock Martin is that he wasn't an actor. He was actually the doorman from Grauman's Chinese Theater. And that's that famous theater in Los Angeles. He was the doorman there. And the reason why they used Lock Martin in the role of Gort was because he was tall. And they needed a tall person to fit into the Gort suit, so Gort looked menacing and formidable. But a strange thing about that is that Lock Martin actually was a very frail person. He wasn't very strong physically. There's a scene toward the end of the film where Gort has to carry Patricia Neal's character around, and they actually had to use wires for that because Lock Martin couldn't physically do it. And another thing is that the Gort suit was so hard for him to wear because he had such a frail frame that he could only wear it for about a half an hour at a time, and then they had to take the suit off. So that was a neat trivia thing I thought was something worth noting. Alright, now we get into one of the fun parts I like to do in these videos, and that is the segment Silly Stuff. Alright, now this segment of Silly Stuff involves a moment at the beginning of the film where, like I said before, the flying saucer lands, the army surrounds it, and Klaatu comes out of the flying saucer, and he is dressed in a spacesuit, and he's got a helmet covering his face, so we don't really know what he looks like. And he doesn't say anything. He has this device in his hand, and he starts walking toward the soldiers who have their rifles drawn and are aimed at him, and he's walking slowly toward them with this device, and at one point these spikes pop out of this device real unexpectedly, and the soldiers, they panic and they shoot him. And we come to find out that this device is actually intended to be a gift for the president, and it does, I don't know what it does, it gives him the secrets of the universe or something, I can't remember what it does, but he's kind of like, this was a gift for your president, and you shot me. And I'm like, what did you expect, Klaatu? You landed unexpectedly, there's soldiers surrounding you, you have a device, you walk up, you don't say anything, and it pops deals out. Yeah, you're going to get shot. Sorry. Alright, so that brings me to my final thoughts about this film. Like I said before, this is a good movie. I enjoy this film. But keep in mind, this is a slow burn. This is not an action adventure type story. We did Earth versus the Flying Saucers in another video recently, and that's a movie where you got flying saucers going around, laser shooting buildings and knocking them over, and you got aliens coming out and they got heat rays and they're shooting people. That's not what we get in this film. This is more of a character study. This is more of a cultural reference. This is more of a story where we're looking at our system, our humanity, and holding a mirror up to that. It's cerebral in that way. This is a talking film, not necessarily an action-adventure story. Like Gort is Klaatu's enforcer, and in the beginning of the film he comes out and he's got the laser eyes and he makes a spectacle out of shooting guns out of the soldiers' hands and make a point. But for most of the story, Gort is standing statuesque, and he poses a threat, and that comes in later in the film. But it's definitely a story that gets you thinking. It's more of a social commentary. It's not like, say, Earth versus the Flying Saucers or War of the Worlds, where we're getting battles and destruction and that sort of thing. We're not necessarily going there in this movie. Now, if you're in the market for a story like that, then definitely check this one out. If you're more interested in the space battles and that sort of thing, you're not going to get that from this. But I do implore you to definitely watch the film if you are interested in classic sci-fi, if you are interested in something that is has a good pedigree, because it has been parodied in The Simpsons. It has had a remake done. I throw those out there in these videos simply as a way to illustrate that, if things like that are happening, then it's definitely had an impact in pop culture. And for that reason, it's worth a watch. And it's not very long. It's an hour and a half. You can get through it. We didn't talk about what Klaatu was coming down to Earth to do, and it turns out we get this toward the end of the film, but he's coming to warn humanity that we know you got the nuclear bomb now. Because again, this is 1951, so the arms race is kicking in. We already had Hiroshima, and basically Klaatu saying, look, we know you got a bomb. We know you're capable of using it. We represent a peaceful society in space, and we don't want you bringing that stuff to space. And so you better get your act together, is more or less what Klaatu has to say. And the whole film is building up to the moment where he gets to make that speech and pretty much tell us that we need to mind our P's and Q's, or they're going to come down and they're going to take care of us and ensure that we're not going to cause any trouble in the galaxy. And that's the basic message and the idea behind it. But it is, again, that social commentary. It's us holding a mirror up to ourselves and showing our shortcomings so that maybe someday we can rise above it. And it's that kind of movie that does that kind of thing. and I enjoy it for that reason. So again, the movie is The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951. Great stuff. Check it out if you get a chance. And again, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate it. And until the next time, have a good one.